Leon, America's most experienced war correspondent, and generally the guy who is willing to go into the places most people won't and report on that stuff. And we tried to make it work, and we had some technical difficulties that just we couldn't get figured out for whatever reason. So we didn't think that you would want to hear Michael yawn or watch Michael's lips move and only hear half of what he was saying. So I'm going to try to get him back for another show. He's currently down in Arizona watching what's going on in there. He flew directly from, I believe, Thailand after spending 2 or 3 months in Europe watching what's going on over there to be in Maricopa County, which seems to be ground zero of, quote, election anomalies, unquote. It's kind of weird what's going on down there. You would have thought that after the 2020 election, when they did probably the most extensive election audit that perhaps it's ever been perpetrated or launched in America, you would think that they would have it sorted out down there. But after talking to Mike in a phone call after we couldn't get it to work, he said that it looks like the election down there is being stolen. I didn't really get the stats on Arizona, but as I understand Arizona, it's not like it's not a heavily Democratic state like Oregon is as far as voter registration. I believe it's still more Republican than it is Democrat. I'd have to look that up. And I can't really do that while I'm talking into the little thing up here because I can barely chew gum and walk at the same time. Sometimes I stumble when I blow a bubble. But talking to him, it sounds like they are the people down there that are counting the ballots. And of course, Joseph Stalin famously said that he cared more about who counted the ballots than who actually voted the ballots. Because that's how elections are made in Stalin's eyes. And in, most of the crap hole countries around the world, I think elections are still counted that way. But Michael seemed to indicate that there's a bunch of stuff going on down there and nobody's even trying to hide it. Even after 2020, even after the forensic audit, even after all eyes were on Arizona for quite some time, that those that would perpetrate voter fraud or whatever the heck they're doing down there, it's so hard. It's so hard to come up with actual smoking guns as far as this stuff is concerned. But he says, yeah, they're not even hiding it. They're just doing whatever they need to do. So it's kind of interesting what's going on down there. So back here at home, and I will say one thing, I had a little hesitation doing a show by myself because if you're a regular watcher of the show, you know that my Elon Musk Starlink occasionally cuts out and I freeze. And I wasn't sure how to do that with just one person on the show, but I did notice that I get a kind of a notification up on this bar that I'm watching on this particular platform of when I am no longer connected. So I will try my very best to watch that. And when I do freeze, I'll just sit here and twiddle my thumbs. Hopefully you'll stay with us or stay with me until I come back. So here at home, tomorrow's the big day. The Democrat supermajority, I don't know if it was the last session or was the session before that, but they passed a law requiring that that all ballots that are postmarked by November 8th, regardless of when they are actually delivered to the county clerk, the elections office, will be counted up until November 15th, which is tomorrow. So tomorrow we should have the final numbers on the election. And as you know, it was pretty close in Oregon. It's been, I can't remember any time in recent history that we were so close statewide. I think 2018, I think we were at least 6%. If I'm not mistaken, maybe it was closer to 8%. But it looks like Drazen and Kotek are going to end up being about 3.5%. So I think we can say when you start drawing conclusions from the numbers, because that's what I do. I look at all the numbers, and I hear stuff. I heard something today. It was in another. Oh, it was Washington. It's on Lars. Lars had mentioned that there was something on the ballot in the state of Washington, or maybe it was in a city. I'm not sure, a county or something, but it was some sort of initiative or legislation or referendum to ban natural gas, and it was like 92% or something against natural gas. So I hear things like that, and I look at the numbers, and I just try to extrapolate the data out of those numbers as to how people think. And I think looking at the numbers statewide, I think we can come to the conclusion. Number one, that Kotek was just a little bit over 47%. And we know that the last election, Brown won by just a little over 50%. So it's not science, and it's not written in stone, but I think we can kind of extrapolate from that Betsy Johnson, the Democrat turned NAV, non-affiliated voter who ran a very well-funded campaign, and seemingly a campaign targeted at Republicans. At least it appeared that way to me. She made a lot of pitches to Republicans. It seems to me that she has probably taken 3.5% of the vote. I would expect, and I think it's reasonable to expect, that Kotek would do roughly the same as Brown. I mean, I think Kotek's probably going to be a worse governor than Brown, but I think all of the things aside, she probably should have been somewhere close to that 50% mark. So Betsy did do, I think, what a lot of people on our side, our team, and my team is the Republican team. I'm Team R, Team Red, whatever you want to call it. She did, in fact, give a number of perhaps more moderate Democrat voters in the state of Oregon someone to vote for other than Kotek. And unfortunately, it just wasn't enough. Now, I don't know where the rest of her votes came from. I mean, I would imagine that she took some non-affiliated votes, but there was only like 380,000 of those people voted, right? I would imagine she may have taken some, perhaps some independent party voters, and I think only probably 50, maybe 60,000 of those people voted. So she didn't take a lot of votes, I think, from the minor parties or the non-affiliateds. It appears to me that she grabbed her votes primarily from the Democrats, and to a lesser extent, or to a lesser percentage, probably with the help of some quote prominent unquote former Republican leaders, one of them being the former Oregon Republican Party chair, now my commissioner down in Josephine County, with their endorsements. I think that Betsy probably scooped up at least a couple of percent of the Republican vote as well. But without her scooping 3.5% of the Democrat vote, but we wouldn't have been as close. I mean, Christine Drazen just wouldn't have been as close. And I think it's real difficult for a lot of people to understand that, because I think a lot of people leading up to this election, they were looking at polling. Polling never showed, the polling that was released never showed Drazen clearly ahead. Polling usually showed her maybe up 2 or 3 points, maybe 4 points, which is generally considered in most polling to be the margin of error. So polling, she was kind of, she was in the vicinity. It could have went her way. But I think a lot of people believe that because of everything that has gone down in the state of Oregon in the last couple of years, that most people would not vote for Tina Kotek. But the fact of the matter is there are 300,000 more Democrat voters in the state of Oregon out of a little less than 3 million. So 10% of the registered voters, or 34%, 10% more of the registered voters are Democrat than they are Republican. So the way it breaks down in the state of Oregon is we have 34% of the voters are Democrats, and 24% of the voters are Republican. And in political circles, we call that D plus 10, or there's a 10% advantage or a 10-point advantage in favor of Democrats. So it's a little different than Arizona, where I believe if it's not R plus something, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, it's pretty dead even. And I apologize for not getting those numbers so I could make a more accurate assessment of the differences between the two. But if Oregon were in fact, like, say, R plus 1 or R plus 2 or R plus 3 or anything, obviously much so anything above that, if it were that, then I would think, that a Democrat or the Republican would win, that we would have had Christine Drazan for the governor. But the way elections work, we're D plus 10. And it's just, it's a heavy lift. It's a heavy lift for a Republican to win when Democrats have such a large voter base or voter advantage. The first thing that you hear when you hire a political consultant to say, run your race, you decide you're going to become a state representative or what it is. The first question they ask, well, the first question might be, can you raise money? And that should be a very important question, because money makes all the difference in politics. I know people don't like to hear that, but that's what it is. That's the way it is. But probably the first or the second question is, what's your registration? If you're D plus 20, you're probably not going to win. And a political consultant, if he's honest, will just say, hey, you're not going to win. If you're D plus 10, he might go, it's going to be pretty tough, but I don't think you're going to win. I mean, we can give it a shot. And that's given the fact that everything is, candidates are equal, money's equal, everything's equal. You got a good candidate on both sides. They both have, let's say, $1 million, whatever it is. It's a tough row to hoe. So I asked myself the question this afternoon. I asked myself this question because I've been trying to help people understand that even if elections in Oregon, and they're not, even if they were 100% verifiably legit, even if they were conducted by God himself, God was doing the counting and not someone from the Stalin School of Elections. Even if that were the case, it would be difficult to elect a Republican because of the voter registration disadvantage. So I asked myself this question: why in Josephine County, which is about R plus, it's more than R plus 10, maybe it's as much as R plus 15. Why can't a Democrat get elected in Josephine County? And the only answer I come up with is there's just too many Republicans here for Democrats to get elected. And I do have some experience with talking to people who run elections in other states, like Texas. And up until recently, up until the last few years, when Democrats have started spending a bunch of money in Texas because they'd really like to flip Texas. And I'm sure once they do, and I'll talk about that later on the show here, I'm sure once they do, they'll go to Florida. But in Texas for last decade, if you were a Democrat and you wanted to get elected in Texas, you would run as a Republican, because there's no other way to get elected in Texas. If you got a D by your name on a ballot in Texas for the last 10 years or so, you are not going to get elected. My son actually worked for a firm that did election stuff, I guess you'd say, who was hired by, I'm not sure whom, but someone in Texas to investigate and check out some of these so-called Republicans in Texas to find out whether or not they were Democrats in disguise, because that was the going way for Democrats to get their foot in the door in Texas, was to run as Republicans. So the whole point of this is, if you got more Republicans, you're going to elect Republicans. If you have more Democrats, you're going to elect Democrats. I would say in the state of Oregon, vote by mail has got to be, it would seem to me, and I haven't the slightest idea how people rig elections. I've never done it, wouldn't know how. I would think that voting by mail would be easier. Perhaps if everyone voted at an electronic terminal in person, or not in person. Perhaps if everybody stuck an ATM card in a machine and used that to vote, perhaps that would be easier to rig the election, because there's no paper trail. Everything is electronic. Perhaps that would be the absolute easiest way to manipulate the numbers at the end of the day. Don't really know, because never done it, never thought about it. But I would imagine that that mail-in balloting would be at least second to that. I would I would imagine that dogs just try to get in my studio here. They're like, "Hey, let us in there. We need to talk to the people." So, vote by mail in Oregon. A lot of people, there's a lot of misunderstanding. Number one, about vote for mail in Oregon. One of the things I kind of wanted to talk about is I just want to kind of clarify some things. The thing, maybe we can call this myth busters. We can present a myth here and either bust it or confirm it. But one of the things I keep seeing, and people are pissed. People had an expectation that Oregon would, if not flip and have a red wave, at least make some gains and perhaps get a Republican governor. And we did in fact make some gains, and we need to remember that we've made more gains this year than we've made in many years, many cycles. But there's a lot of myths, I think, surrounding vote by mail. And one of the things you hear out there, where people are in groups or settings, is we've had vote by mail since 1988, and the Democrats have controlled the state ever since. Like Democrats somehow made vote by mail come to be, and it's been manipulated ever since. So that's, and I'm going to call it a myth, because it's not entirely accurate. So vote by mail in Oregon, it was 1987, 1988, somewhere in there. The legislature passed a law to allow counties and local elections to be performed through the mail as a cost-saving measure. And in 1998, Measure 60 was put on the ballot, and that brought mail-in balloting to the state elections as well, and federal elections as well. And that was passed by the voters. It was passed handily. I think it was 2-1. It was 60 some odd percent to 30 some odd percent. So it was a very popular thing among voters in the state of Oregon. But Democrats have not controlled the state ever since. Most of the elected positions in the state of Oregon, I think it's close to 70%. Most of the elected positions in the state of Oregon, now listen to me when I say this, most of the elected people in the state of Oregon are Republicans. And you go, well, how can that be? Because most of the elected positions are, in fact, local positions. They're county commissions, they're water boards, they're fire boards, they're city councils, they're mayors, and they're school boards. And most of those, I think, with the exception of some commissions, most of those are nonpartisan races. And so you don't necessarily, you don't get it. You don't get an R or a D next to the name on the ballot. But if you're involved in politics and you want to make the right decision regarding your local elections, you figure out who's who. And most of those people are, in fact, conservative people. So we live in a state where most of the elected positions are, in fact, Republican. And those positions have been elected by vote by mail since, I believe, 1988. And they're still mostly Republican, and they're still being collected, or the elections are being held by vote by mail. So the claim that vote by mail ushered in Democrat control of the state is a little it's inaccurate to say the least. So the Republicans controlled the House of Representatives in the state of Oregon until about 2002. The Republicans controlled the Senate in the state of Oregon till about 2005. So when vote by mail was instituted, it was instituted by Republican majorities. When Measure 60 was passed, it was actually supported. And this is kind of embarrassing for our team, my team. It was actually supported by the then executive director and chairman of the Oregon Republican Party, who was, I forget his name now, Randy something. He was a senator. So because everybody thought it was a great idea, it saved a bunch of money and that it does, and it is convenient. I mean, it's convenient for me, so, and for those people that do vote, I think it's very convenient. I'm not sure what it really did for voter turnout because I've never really crunched those numbers, but I do kind of somewhat remember looking at them thinking that the actual turnout did increase. So I would say that myth is busted. The myth that we got vote by mail in 1988 and Democrats have controlled the state ever since has been busted. Have we won a governorship? No, we have not. Did we control the House till 2002? Yes. Did we control the Senate till 2005? Yes. Are most of the local positions within the state of Oregon Republican held? Yes, they are. Did Dennis Richardson win statewide in 2016? Yes, he did. So it's a little inaccurate. So that's one of the myths that I kind of wanted to address. One of the other things that I see going around, and I think this is really causing a lot of anguish and a lot of hand slamming on the desk and fist pumping and yelling and screaming, is that votes are going to are still being counted 1 week after the election, and a lot of people are saying, well, that's got to be evidence of fraud. And I would say that it would certainly make fraud easier. I think Democrats probably thought, when they passed this, that it would give them every possible chance to get every possible vote, whether it be legitimate or not, into the election results. But here's the deal: a lot of people don't know, because a lot of people don't pay attention, is that the Democrat supermajority in Salem passed a law, saying that votes would be counted, as I mentioned earlier in the show, until 1 week, till November 15th, after the election. So, is it evidence of fraud? Could be, but it is the law, and that's why we're doing it. I don't agree with it. I think it really needs to. Personally, I think it needs to be repealed. And I did talk. One person asked me a question. I was having an online discussion. One person asked me a question. Well, what about that law? And what about the law that they passed that disallowed the cleansing or cleaning of the voter rolls, removing inactive voters, so on and so forth? They said, what about all that stuff? And I think all of that stuff should be on the table. But here's the deal. It won't be on the table as long as Democrats have a majority in the House and the Senate in the state of Oregon. Because it takes a majority to repeal those laws, repeal the regulations, pass different laws. And so it's a little like building a house. You can ask someone who doesn't know how to build a house, how do you build a house? Well, you go buy a bunch of wood and you just put up a house. And you ask somebody who knows a little bit more about building a house, and they'll say, hey, well, you got to put a foundation in first. That's the very first thing. And then if you ask experts, how do you build a house? They'll go, yeah, you need a foundation. But before that, you're going to have to do a little bit of excavation. And so on and so forth down the line, until you get to the very first step, the very foundational step upon which you can build whatever it is you want to build. In this case, we want to build change. We want to repeal bad laws that were passed by either the majority of Democrats or the supermajority of Democrats. So the very foundation we need to do here is we need to get balance in the state of Oregon. We don't have balance in our legislature. We don't have a majority in either the House or the Senate. And if we want to change things, we need to get the gavel. We need to get a gavel in the House. We need to get a gavel in the Senate. And I think at a point in time when we can make that happen, we can get a Republican governor as well. And so people ask me, well, how do you do that? Well, I think you do it the same way the Democrats did it. So as we're looking at, all of the voter outcomes from, like, let's say 1988, when vote by mail was passed for local elections. If you look at the voter registration data, you will see that at some point in time, Democrats have more registered voters than Republicans. And then that just keeps going up and up and up until we get to 2022. Actually, it's been for the last few years that we've had 300,000 more Democrats registered than Republicans. If you watch that line in voter registration, and you watch the number of people elected to, let's say, the state house in either a representative district or a Senate district, it's linear, it's proportional. So the more Republicans that are in fact, or the more Democrats that are in fact registered, the better the electoral outcomes have been for Democrats over the last 30 years. So how do they do that? They spend a lot of time on it. They spend a lot of money on it. They pay people to go out and knock doors. They pay people to make phone calls. They pay people to go to the naturalization ceremonies. There is always the opportunity at any naturalization ceremony, I believe, in the entire state of Oregon, no matter where it might be held, to register Democrat the very moment you become a U.S. citizen. And so they employ these, I guess you call them tactics, but what it is, it's a strategy. It's a strategy to win electorally in a state. And we have seen it in Oregon, among political junkies, I guess, like me, maybe. The term that, when do the Democrats, go back to work? It's the day after election day. They go back to work on Wednesday. They go back out knocking doors. They go back out trying to register people who have just become citizens. They're out there registering people who are turning 18. They are out there registering every single person can, because that is how you win electorally, given the absence of significant fraud or enough fraud, to where you don't need to do that. But, they've done that in other states too. The case study, I don't know how to describe it, but the one big shining example of how this strategy works is Colorado. Colorado was a Republican state forever. And within about 4 years, after a very concerted, strategic, well-funded, committed, persistent, relentless attack on voter registration by Democrats, it is now a Democrat state. It's a blue state, and that was done by systematically registering people to vote. So I think, I hate to give Democrats credit for anything because their policies suck. Their policies are wrong. And our policies are better. Our policies are better for everybody. Our policies are better for Democrats. Our policies are better for progressives or the Pacific Greens or maybe not libertarians. I kind of have a soft spot in my heart for going full libertarian. But, our policies are good and their policies suck. So I hate giving them credit, but I will say that they work very, very hard to win. And they spend a lot of money to win. And they have a lot of people who are willing to help them win, mostly because they pay them. That's one of the secrets of the Democrat operations in the state of Oregon and elsewhere in the nation. They, for the most part, pay them. But they're very good at this. And I think one of the things that we need to do in the state of Oregon, because I believe that we can close that registration gap. I've talked with people who have done it in other states, have closed the registration gap when Democrats got out too far, and they spent money and time, knocking doors, making phone calls, standing out in front of the post office and the grocery store and going to high schools, graduations, and registering people Republican, that it can be done. I mean, I think we can do it in the state of Oregon, and I think it would be a harbinger and the death knell for the progressive encampment and entrenchment on the West Coast, to see a state like Oregon close that registration gap and start to elect Republicans. I mean, if we closed it to just half, if we just registered, let's say, 150,000 more Republicans, we would start winning in the state. And as that continued to get closer to even, we would take the House, we would take the legislature, and we would eventually take all the offices. And one of the things that would happen, I think I froze. It's still saying that I'm froze. Okay, I'm unfrozen. Guy, I hope I forgot to watch that. I hope I didn't freeze a whole bunch of other times. But what I was saying is, once we close the registration gap and start getting wins in the state of Oregon, progressives would stop moving to the state of Oregon, because we'd become like Florida and Texas to them. It's like, oh my God, there's too many Republicans there, too many insurrectionists, too many white supremacists, and everything else that the mainstream media tells people that we are, which we all know is a bunch of crap. But a lot of people suck it up anyhow, and there you have it. So I'm not sure if I made any sense tonight, but I think I'd like to see people have at least an option, other than just throwing up their hands and saying everything's rigged, my vote doesn't count, screw it, I'm not going to vote anymore. Whatever action people take, and I think once people lose hope and lose faith in the election system, I think that's what happens, is they stop voting. I'd like to know that if people out there, that there's an option, and the option is to just change it. I'm incapable of wallowing in problems. It's a character defect that I can't just wallow in a problem and stay in the problem. That defect makes me want to solve problems, and so whenever there's a problem, I look for solutions. And the solution here, I think, is obviously, there's a bunch of crap that we need to fix in our voting system. I think the voter rolls are probably horrible. I think if we were able to audit the voter rolls and to clean out the dead people and the people that moved out and the people that shouldn't be registered to vote anyhow, we'd probably, instead of being D+10, we'd probably be about D+8, maybe even D+7. I think there's quite a bit of fraud probably in the voter rolls, and that's been added over many, many years. And I think we need to clear that. But I think if we start getting to a place where we have more and more Republicans voting in elections, I think we'd have a lot more hope in the state of Oregon. The way it is now, almost everybody, I think, wants to move. It's like, oh my God, Tina Kotek, she's going to be, probably far worse than Brown. And I tend to agree with that. But a lot of us can't move. I have businesses here that I can't just pick them up and move them to a different state. And I think that's the same with a lot of other people. They have jobs here, they have family here, churches here, whatever it is, businesses here, and they just can't pick up and move. So I guess what I was trying to do tonight is I was trying to just offer some solutions. I think people are angry. People had the expectation that there would be a giant red wave, and that giant red wave would wash over pretty blue Oregon. at least electorally speaking, voter registration speaking, it's pretty blue. It would wash over Oregon, and it didn't. But we did do a lot of good. I mean, it looks pretty clear that we have another representative in the U.S. Congress. We broke the supermajority stranglehold in the legislature. And we did really well on a lot of local ballots. So I think there's a lot to celebrate. And I just hope that people would look at that and go, hey, there are some things we can do better. There are some strategies that we can execute, strategies that we can take from Democrats and implement them in the state of Oregon for a better policy outcome for every single Oregonian. Because clearly, less government, more freedom, less regulation, lower taxes, they benefit everybody. And I think at some point in time, we'll be able to get there. We just have to work hard and increase our voter registration, increase our voter turnout. I'm always disappointed when there's a big block of Republicans that could have turned out and changed the election. And that's unfortunate in this particular instance. And it makes me very disappointed to know that if just 12 or 13% more Republicans, or another way to say it, if just the same amount of Republicans that voted just 2 years ago, 2 years and 1 week ago, if those same people had just voted in this election, Christine Drazan would either be governor, or at the very least, we'd be heading to a recount. That's how important turnout is. We had roughly a 75% turnout by Republicans, and we generally turn out between 87, 88, sometimes as high as 89% in presidential years, which was 2 years ago. If we'd had that same turnout, that 88, 89%, it'd be a much different race. I'm pretty sure that we would have a Republican governor. So, and I have the slightest idea how to fix that. If you get involved in politics, you become a precinct committee person, or whatever it is, get in with a PAC or a group, whatever it is, People's Rights, Free Oregon, whatever it is, Restore Oregon Now, and you try to work to get people to turn out to vote, you will come away scratching your head going, I can't figure out why we have to beg people to vote. And if you ever figure that out, I'd like to know exactly what the deal is on that, because it just absolutely has stumped me for the last 13 or 14 years, why I have to get on the phone or knock on a door and beg people to return their ballot. I don't know if I'll ever figure it out. But if you figure it out, let me know. This is Captive Audience. We'll be back again tomorrow night. I will reschedule with Michael Yan when we can get perhaps a better connection, and he'll give us a live update as to what's going on down in Arizona. It could be tomorrow, could be Friday, it could be Wednesday as well. He's being joined by Steve Bannon down there, and they're going to, kind of sniff around and see what the heck's going on down there, and hopefully he can give us a live update. But thank you all for tuning in. Appreciate it. I appreciate it if you would share it. I'm sorry that I did not have the comment thing. I'm not sure how to do that in the dashboard as host. When I was sent a guest link, I had the comments over there. It was kind of nice because I could feel like I'm connected, but I don't. And I'll figure out how to do that, but I'll review your comments anyhow. But to everyone, have a good night.